What's up, guys? Rick here with your DFS preview for this week's Shriners Hospitals for Children Open. I think that's the last time I'll say the full name of the event, but this is a great field. This is the first of two legs in Las Vegas. Remember, the CJ Cup gets moved from Korea to Shadow Creek in Las Vegas. So a lot of the guys who are going to end up playing that event also opting to play here at the Shriners since they're going to be in Vegas. So we have a great field that we're going to be talking through, but a few housekeeping items here off the top. I've got winners from last week that I drew for a subscription to RickRunGood.com. That's the site where all the tools that you're going to see me ever use are available. That's my site. Those two winners, James Coward and Brendan Tyndall, however you say it, congratulations. I've sent you a note. Get in touch with me. I'll get you all set up on the website. Couple of other housekeeping items. If you would like to win a subscription to RickRunGood.com or merch or swag or whatever, I've got something a bit different this week. So I'm going to use the very short off season that we have in between. Basically, I think it's the end of Mayakoba, the first week of December, through the Tournament of Champions. There's 3 weeks off for golf, and that is usually the time of the year where I really dive in and update the database, make a lot of improvements to the site, and I'm asking for a little bit of input from you. So there is a survey in the description of this video, and I'll show you what it looks like because it is very simple and it'll take you about 5 seconds to answer. Just asking, what fantasy sites do you play on? If you're here for fantasy golf, golf betting, or both content, what state you are in, and then if you have any questions about fantasy golf or golf wagering, because I think in the past, I've kind of made the mistake of creating tools just to create tools, saying I have to have a cheat sheet or I have to have game logs or whatever without thinking about what and why. So if you have a question like, here's a really great question. What types of players fit this course? If that's the question, I can create tools around how to answer them. So this is your opportunity to provide some input, hopefully help the direction of the website, because I'm going to really dive in. And actually, I've already started diving in to creating all the new stuff for the end of this year and into next year. So it's going to be awesome. Have a lot of great stuff in mind, but wanted to give you guys an opportunity. And if you fill this out, I'll randomly draw a lot of names. I mean, I've got subscriptions to the website. I've obviously got hats and shirts, and I have golf balls with the Rick Run Good logo on them. I have a box full of water bottles that I had made up for the DFS Open. I've got a bunch of stuff in the closet I can give away. So I'll just draw at random and give some of that stuff away, try to empty out the closet a little bit. So it helps both of us, hopefully. And then the final thing, there is a live chat this week, again on Wednesday. They've been very popular. I've been pleasantly surprised with how they're going. We're going to continue to do that. So it'll be Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern. A little bit earlier this time, 10 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. That live chat already exists. So you can go to youtube.com/RickRunGood, see it on upcoming live streams. You can drop your questions in there now. Quite honestly, that might be the best idea because there's been so many questions, they're hard to get through. So I just start at the top and start rolling through them. So if you want to drop your question in now, better chance that I'm able to get to it. Okay. I think that's everything off the top. Let's jump into this week's Shriners Hospital Open. All right, TPC Summerlin. I love this course. I was actually there Thursday last year. Obviously won't be on site this year, but great walking course. Had the whole place to myself, and we have a lot of great history because TPC Summerlin has been the host of this event since 1992. So plenty of data to go back and look at. And there's a couple things that stand out to me on this par 71, awkward par 71, 7,255 yard course with bent grass greens. You can kind of bomb it without regard for accuracy around here. The rough is almost non-existent, not penal at all. So you can kind of get away with bombing it all over the place. And then the winning scores, 3 of the last 4 years have been 20 under par or better. Historically, there's been a lot of really low scores here. Sometimes this turns into a putting contest. And you can go through on RickRunGood.com and you can see who the bent grass specialists are. But I'm just going to go straight down to the key stats because the data is so strong for this week. And I love it when your observations with your eyeballs coincides with what the data says. And the most important stats at TPC Summerlin, which again, we have great history at, strokes gained putting ranks 4th, meaning that there are only 3 other courses on the PGA Tour in which strokes gained putting is more important. And I haven't mentioned this in a couple of weeks, but if you're new, this is this regression model that I run, which looks at basically, I think we're up to 12 years worth of data now, compares all the golfers' PGA Tour stats for that year and looks at the courses that they have success at. And you can basically start creating profiles of golfers. So I love this. So only 3 other courses in which strokes gained putting was more important. And then only 7 other courses in which driving distance was more important. And to me, that says exactly what I think everyone who's ever been to TPC Summerlin or who has ever seen on TV what's going on. You can bomb it without regard, and it's a putting contest. I think it's very clear. So those are the types of golfers that tend to have success. So if we go down to this field, I hate to break this to you, but there's basically a guy who ranks pretty much number 1 in both of those categories. So we've got Bryson DeChambeau, who is your odds-on favorite. He's your most expensive golfer in the field. Leads the tour in driving distance, 325 yards last season. And then, oh, by the way, in terms of putting, he's 3rd behind only Denny McCarthy and Andrew Putnam. And of course, the other 2, Putnam and McCarthy, come nowhere near the driving distance that Bryson is able to put up. So that's the type of golfer we're looking for. Some of the other good putters, obviously Kevin Na. Well, he's had a ton of success at TPC Summerlin. He's won twice. Christopher Ventura, we're going to talk about him. He is quite honestly, I think he's a really good kind of sleeper-ish play this week. I think he's 80-1 to win this golf tournament. He's $7,100 on DraftKings. You can see not only does he gain strokes off the tee, but he's the 5th best putter in this field. And of the top 5, he's the only other golfer besides Bryson DeChambeau who hits it at least 305 yards. The other guys are, 290, 270, 280. So Ventura is a very unique skill set. He's been playing really well recently. I'm going to keep my eye on him quite a bit this week. Let's jump over to the cheat sheet and dive into kind of each one of these tiers and talk through some of these golfers more in depth. I'm usually the first guy to say, hey, the most expensive golfer, he might not be the best play. I have concerns about it. I have concerns about paying this much. And really the only concern you could possibly have about Bryson DeChambeau is that he won the US Open and he's coming off of this first major title of his career. And how is that going to affect him? If that's the only thing that I can come up with a knock on Bryson DeChambeau, it's a pretty weak argument to make. Because if you look at the course fit, which historically would be perfect for Bryson, bomb it, don't worry about the rough, and then putt your brains out, which is essentially what he did all of last season and through the US Open the last time we saw him. That's the perfect fit, and then the results are there too. So he's played here 4 times. The last 3 have been no worse than a 7th place finish, and he won here 2 years ago. Remember, when you're looking at the event history, we are technically in the 2021 season. So when you see that Bryson finished 4th in 2020, that was this time last year. That was the 2020 season. This is the 2021 season. Don't get those confused. It is a little wonky to think about. So I don't really have a knock for Bryson. We'll see later in the week, and we'll talk about it on the live chat on Wednesday. Like, what is his ownership going to come in at? Is it worth it? Like, because you could make a case that there's a pretty good pivot to Webb Simpson at $11,000, who has 3 straight top 20s here. He's got a 7th place finish last year. If we go to more history, he's played here a lot. So let's pull up Webb here. By the way, won here in 2014. He's only, if Bryson's 7-1, I think Webb was 9 or 10-1. So if the ownership of these two golfers comes in significantly different, you could argue that Webb would be a pretty good GPP pivot if Bryson is 25% owned and Webb is 12.5, because Bryson's not 2 times as likely to win this golf tournament as Webb Simpson is. So I think that's interesting. We'll talk about that on Wednesday. I don't think that's a topic for today. We don't know enough yet. Both of them, I think, are very great plays. And then here's what's kind of shocking here. I'm almost like, a couple things. I don't want to skip Patrick Cantlay. Patrick Cantlay is, if you love course history, Patrick Cantlay is your guy. I'm not as in on Cantlay. He's kind of been meddling around. He's been a little bit average since the Memorial. I think he only has one finish inside the top 30 in his last 6 starts. But when you have a guy who's played here 3 times and he's gone win, runner-up in those 3 trips, you're talking about some of the best course history for any golfer at any event. I'm trying to think who else would even, like Hideki at Waste Management is probably up there. I mean, there's just Webb at Wyndham. Like there's probably so few guys that could even though it's only 3 years, boast anything close to that at any event. But I'm kind of in a wait and see approach on Patrick Cantlay. I think that history is going to drive a lot of ownership. Again, we'll consider that on Wednesday. I'm kind of appalled at where Tony Finau is at. 10,200, and he's played well here. But let's look up let's pull this up here. I was just so shocked to see Finau be the 4th shortest odds, which then in turn makes him essentially the 4th most expensive golfer on the slate. I was shocked by this. I know he's coming off the 8th place finish at the US Open. I know he played well down the stretch and he popped up at the PGA and he contended at the 3M and he probably should have won the Memorial, right? I get all that. But you're now talking a price range that almost requires victory or almost requires you to finish in the top 10. And I just would like it a lot more. I'll tell you what I would like. I would like it if he switched places with Colin Morikawa. If Morikawa was 10-2 and Tony Finau was 9,800, that to me would make a lot more sense. Morikawa, you have to remember, I mean, the start that he had to his career, which was, the 5 consecutive cuts made, second to only Tiger Woods. That streak's over, and since then, he's been a lot more volatile, right? He's missed 3 cuts in his last 9 starts. The opposite side of that is he's won twice, including at Muirfield Village and the PGA Championship. So if he's going to be more volatile and he's just going to win more, that's kind of cool too. I think what's interesting is I think it's kind of appalling that I saw his number at 22 or 23-1. I think it's kind of crazy that he is the 6th most expensive golfer on this slate. He's a local. He's a resident of Las Vegas. This should be he's probably sleeping in his own bed this week or for the next 2 weeks. This should be a very comfortable stretch of golf for him. And I do understand that his weapon, one of his weapons, his ability to hit every fairway doesn't really matter here. Doesn't necessarily play well at TPC Summerlin or it's not required. But you're talking about putting a wedge in his hand, putting an iron in his hand. He's the best in the world. Is it going to turn into a putting contest? Maybe, which I guess I'd have a little bit of concern about. We know the putting has been the bugaboo for Morikawa in his young career, but let me do this real quick because I think there's a story to tell. Let's look up. How are we going to do this here? Let's do Morikawa. Again, I'm using the Holy Grail tool on RickRunGood.com. It's in the strokes gain database. So I'm just going to filter by Colin Morikawa. And I'm going to do his career up until the break, up until the 91 days that the tour went on break. Let's see what his putting stats were, because I think he's been a lot better after this. I think he's maturing is what I'm getting at here. So he was a negative 0.17 putter in 80 rounds in his career before the break. Let's see what he is after the break. It might not be any better. My perception just might be that it's a lot better. So 80 rounds before, and okay, yeah, he's about what is that? 4/10 of a shot better, almost a half a shot better. So he goes from minus 0.17 to plus 0.16. So we're talking about a third of a shot per round on the greens better than he was before the break. I think that's a story to tell. I think that's progress. He's very young. He's maturing. I think there's a story to tell there. And if he starts to putt, even if he putts like this, like he has since the restart for the rest of his career, he's going to win a ton, an absolute ton, because the rest of his game is so strong. So that's my case. I'll probably make it all week that Morikawa, arguably the most mispriced golfer, and it might only be $400, but $400 at 9,800 and 10-2, like I think it's a big difference. And then you put a couple guys in between them. I think it is. I think it is significant. We might as well stay on that on the Holy Grail for a bit and see what's going on here. So I've loaded in obviously the Shriners field, and what we can actually do here is we can do this by the Shriner. So we can see who's played well here historically. So let's load this up and give it a second. It's a lot of data. So I've got like 4 or 5 years loaded in here. And we'll just sort by strokes gained total. Of course, Patrick Cantlay in his 12 rounds, I mean, averaging over 3 per round is phenomenal. Pat Perez, I have 8 measured rounds for him, so that's 2 years. He's second. He's only $7,000. He's played a little bit better recently. I've actually made the argument that I think it's been a little bit of fool's gold that Pat Perez has been as good as he has been, but plays well here. I think he's got ties to Vegas, right? Doesn't he have? Let me look this up. I'm pretty sure he's a Vegas guy, or I'm confusing it with Phoenix. Yeah, I think I'm confused. He's an Arizona guy. I thought he had ties to Vegas for some reason. Maybe he just likes to party in Vegas. I don't know. Frankie Molinari back in the field for the first time since a while. A WGC event, I think. He's back in the field. Ricky Fowler's played well here. Again, only 1 year's worth of history. And then here's DeChambeau, who's got the 4 years, the biggest sample size, averaging over 2 strokes gained per round. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. But I'm actually going to transition this to just since the restart, and I will unfilter on tournament, and we'll just see the best players in this field. And you can see Christopher Ventura. There's that name that's going to pop up again. So he's 5th on this list. In his 18 rounds since the restart, he's gaining over a stroke and a half per round. By far the best of anybody under $8,000. Sam Burns also on that list. He missed the cut last week, but there are some values in this field. And if you want to kind of look at the ball strikers better, the tee to green guys, I mean, Camilo Villegas, I don't know what he ended up finishing last week. I can look this up, but he only has 6 rounds. But he's the best in this field in strokes gained tee to green. I think the vast majority of that was from last week. He was great from tee to green. Then you get your standard Will Zalatoris, Russell Henley, Sergio, Hideki, Scotty Scheffler. HV3 is kind of sneaky, right? HV3 all the way down at $7,500. He is 4, 5, 6, 7th in this field in strokes gained tee to green since the restart. That's a pretty sizable sample, and it's also a very important stat. And he's $7,500. Pretty interesting. I'm in the sub 10K range, in this 9K range. I'm really feeling Matthew Wolff. I've said this countless times about him over the past couple of months. The game is maturing at such a rapid rate. Summerlin should absolutely fit his skill set, right? It just go bomb it. Who cares? See what happens. Don't worry about hitting the fairway because it's not important. And he finished 18th last year. His only trip to TPC Summerlin, actually followed that group around for a little bit. The group was Wolff, Morikawa, and Neiman last year on Thursday and Friday. It was excellent. Matthew Wolff ended up finishing in the top 20. He's coming off the solo second at the U.S. Open. He's just been piling up these top 15 finishes, these top 20 finishes. I think this really suits his game. I do think, so last week, Scotty Scheffler was a fade. Scottie Scheffler was the most expensive golfer on the slate. He was a fade for me. I was a little bit worried about him kind of knocking off the rust and what he's been doing. He ended up finishing 37th. He made the cut, but certainly did not pay himself off. Now he's $2,000 cheaper. That to me seems a little bit off. I mean, you could tell he was rusty. He told us that his game was all over the place. He still ended up finishing in a tie for 37th. I think this is probably a buyback opportunity on Scottie Scheffler, who was one of the most highly owned golfers on the slate last week, if not the most owned golfer. And I think if you owned him, you weren't pleased. He didn't burn you, right? He didn't Sam Burns you, but he certainly didn't pay off. So I don't think there's a huge rush to get back in on Scottie Scheffler. So that's the kind of, zig while others zag situation where this might be the opportunity to go get him at 9,400. Who else is down here? Sergio's 91. I think if you've been following along long enough, you kind of understand. I'm not a big Sergio guy. I'm also certainly not a big, hey, play the guy who wins for the first time in 3 years, play him the week after when he's now multiple $1,000s more expensive. He's still going to be a tee to green guru. He made a lot of news and storylines for literally putting with his eyes closed last week. And to his credit, the numbers were awesome. I mean, if you go to his strokes gained stuff by round, he gained strokes putting in each of his 4 rounds last week. I could not find another instance in my database in which for all 4 rounds of a single tournament, Sergio Garcia gained strokes putting. Now, the weird part is he's been telling us he's been closing his eyes, and he's been doing this for the better part of 3 or 4 years, which, one, I don't necessarily believe, but if you want to believe it, then last week was kind of an outlier, because if he's been doing this, he's still not a very good putter. And last week might have been that outlier that we look for in some of these, hashtag team no putt golfers. So I'm not going to buy in on it. If you think Sergio's a good play this week, he's probably going to be a good play many other weeks. No need for me to get in on Serge. Here's another one. Louis Oosthuizen. So he withdrew last week on Monday, I guess. So the odds were already out. The salaries were already out. He was 11,400, I believe. Whatever his price was, he was the second most expensive golfer behind Scottie Scheffler. And I before we started recording anything, I was thinking, he might be a pretty good pivot off of Scottie because he's played so well recently. Now he's 8,800, huge discount. I liked him last week. I'm probably going to I have to like him this week. Finished 3rd at the US Open, 25th at the BMW Championship, 13th at the Northern Trust. He's never played here in Vegas, but there's nothing to really argue about. He was expensive last week. The industry thought he had a good chance to win last week. The field it gets better, but it doesn't get that much better if you're Louis Oosthuizen. This is a big discount. I think you got to kind of feel the waves of the industry, as it moves week in and week out. And Louis feels like a guy that's now in a buy opportunity. The bottom of this 8K range, the Will Zalatoris, Cam Davis, Joaquin Niemann, I think they're all fine. I think they all have decent upside. I think I'm concerned, Cam Davis, who's gotten himself in contention over and over and over again over the past couple of months, 2 months or so, seems to melt down on Sunday or on the weekend almost every single time he gets there. That'll stop eventually. He'll start feeling more comfortable in that situation, but man, it is really difficult to want to back him, right? To want to be a part of that, knowing that, maybe he's just a showdown play because he can go out and shoot something really low 1 or 2 rounds at a time, but it's hard for him to put all 4 together, especially when it comes to the weekend. Sub 7K range, I think there's very clearly something happening with Denny McCarthy. And I talked about this probably a month ago, and he's been on my radar a lot recently. And let's go look at Denny McCarthy by tournaments here, because there is a story brewing with Denny McCarthy. Okay. So I am now sorted by his by date. Okay, so most recent tournaments first. So I've already looked this up. Look here, since the 3M Open, what his strokes gained approach numbers have been, and what his strokes gained approach numbers were essentially in his entire career before the 3M Open. So here's the numbers behind it. In his last 6 measured events, that goes back to the 3M Open, he's gained a total of 12.9 strokes on approach. To put that into perspective, in the 6 measured events before the 3M Open, he lost 15.9. That is a 28 stroke turnaround. Clearly, he's starting to turn the corner with some of his ball striking. And when he is already the best putter on the PGA Tour for 2 years in a row, now we've got something. We've got something cooking here. And the results are starting to bear it out, right? The 9th at the Wyndham Championship, the 6th last week at Sanderson Farms. He's going to continue to putt like an animal. And if he can add just this one aspect to it, last week he gained strokes in all 4 major categories last week. It's only the 2nd time in his career he's done it, right? I scrolled down here. He did it. Where else did he do it? Did it one other time. Where are you? Oh, right here. 2018 Wyndham Championship. I mean, he was a small gainer, but he did gain in all 4 categories. Only the 2nd time. I really do think something's happening here. And if we talk about this potentially turning into a putting contest, I want the best putter in the world on my side. I really believe Denny's brewing. I really do. Talked about Harold Varner III. He's $7,500. He's one of the better tee to green players, not only recently, but in this field specifically. I think I said he was 7th in strokes gained tee to green since the restart. He's another guy that has to start closing on Sundays, but he's putting himself in positions more and more often. He also had a top 10 at the Wyndham Championship, and he's played a lot here at Summerlin to varying degrees of success. He's made the cut in 4 straight. He had a 15th place finish in the 2019 season. That was his best finish in that stretch. So, varying levels of success. I think he's a fine play. I think it's a really good number on him at 7,500. Lanto is 73. So he's not the automatic sub 7K plug Lanto in, but let's look him up in the strokes gained database because he's just been very solid. And since we haven't seen him play since the US Open. That's what, 3 or 4 weeks that he just kind of goes forgotten. Lanto kind of catches a little bit of steam, and he's played well. 6 consecutive cuts made, 3 top 20 finishes in that stretch, including the BMW Championship, the Tour Championship. I guess the Tour Championship, there was only 30 golfers in it. But I believe he improved his position from the staggered start. And then the PGA Championship was the other top 20. That's obviously great. He made the cut at the US Open. So he's just solid all around, right? You can see there's no real hole in his game. There's not a huge strength either. He's just kind of solid, hanging in there, hanging around type of golfer. And I believe he's played here twice. Missed the cut in the 2018 season, finished 18th in last season's edition of the Shriners. Stuart Sink is 72. He's putting it together. He followed up the win at the Safeway. He didn't play back-to-back, like he didn't play the next week, obviously, but follows up the win at the Safeway. In his next start, he finishes 12th at the Sanderson. That was last week. I thought I read that his son will not be on the bag this week. Not sure if that's negatively or positively impacting or won't impact at all, but I'm pretty sure I read that he will not be on the bag. And we haven't seen Stuart Sink in Vegas since the 2017 season. He finished 15th there. I think that's a fine play, but I imagine a lot of the, I think there's a really interesting case at 7,100. I think Christopher Ventura eats up a lot of this ownership. I think that's fair because he is the rare combination of off the tee, putting, hits it far enough, and he's playing well, right? 2 top 10 finishes in his last 3 starts, which is essentially what got him into this event. But then you have to look at some of the other guys, some of the peers here. And is Christopher Ventura a better play than Joel Damon? Joel Damon, an established tour pro. Is he a better play than Ben On? Ben On is now $3,500 cheaper than he was last week. Let's look at the numbers for Ben because they are very bad from last week. He had a Ben on week. He lost 6.3 strokes putting in 2 rounds. Yeah, that's Ben on. I mean, he's now lost nearly 10.5 over his last 4 rounds. That's what you get when you invest in him. I guess we're aware of that, but is he, does he deserve a $3,500 price decrease? Maybe, maybe not. So I guess what I'm getting at here is I think Ventura is the chalky $7,100-ish play. I think there are some interesting pivots with a Stuart Sink, a Benny On if you really want to take on risk, a Joel Damon, a Pat Perez, who we mentioned earlier, or if you kind of want that safer option, Adam Schenk. If you just want a guy to make a cut, Adam Schenk seems to be that guy right now. I think he's up to 9 cuts in a row on the PGA Tour. He's got 2 top 20 finishes in his 3 starts here in Vegas. I mean, come on. I think it's he just continues to pump out, top 30s. I don't know what his upside is, and I don't know if he knows what his upside is, but he's certainly a safe option at the moment. There are a couple of guys with decent history that I rarely play. I mean, Chesson Hadley, $6,700. He's gone 18th, 7th, and 4th in his last 3 trips here. He is certainly not a safe option, but, a top 15 at the Safeway, a top 20 at the Barracuda, a couple of 50th place finishes, and he missed the cut at the Sanderson. I think you could do worse than Chesson Hadley. There's also Bo Hostler, who 3 straight top 30s here in Vegas, including a 7th 3 years ago. He's been a bit more consistent, right? 4 straight cuts made, but he doesn't have that upside or perceived upside that Chesson Hadley has shown. Those are guys I don't normally play. But, looking at the composition of the field, looking at the peers that they're against, looking at the history around here, especially because the history is so strong at TPC Summerlin, like I'm okay with it this week more than most. And then Xinjun Zhang will kill you like 50% of the time. Will finish in the top 10 or the top 15 like the rest of it. So this is the ultimate boom or bust play, but I think there's a couple of things that are noteworthy. 16th place finish last year, missed the cut 3 years ago. He's one of the only golfers in this range that technically gains strokes in all 4 categories. In fact, he is like the most average golfer on the tour right now. I mean, he's 0.1 positive off the tee. He's 0.01 positive on approach. He's 0.06 positive around the greens, and he's 0.09 positive in putting. So you're talking about a guy who is literally within a 1/10 of a stroke to 0 positive in all 4 categories. He's like the most average golfer on the PGA Tour. Now, I guess the positive side of that is you could be an average golfer on the PGA Tour and finish 65th every single week, but he doesn't do that. He just alternates, or not alternates, but it's like miscut, 11th, miscut, 14th, miscut, 8th. Like he's going to do it that way, which I guess is valuable in some situations. So I certainly wouldn't rule him out in your GPP lineups if you're looking for significant upside, especially because he missed the cut last week. There's going to be little incentive to go back to Xinjun this week. Let's make a custom model and get out of here. Let's make a custom model. So what do we know about Summerlin? Well, I guess we've got to go with distance and we've got to go with strokes gained putting, right? Those are the things that the model we're very high on, and high on them compared to other events or other courses, I should say. So let's go pretty big on it. Let's go 35 on strokes gained putting, and let's do 30 on distance. That leaves us with 35 weights remaining. Let's do, I've got to do a little bit on tee to green, right? We'll do 15 on tee to green. We will do, and let's do 20 on birdie or better. This thing's going to be a scoring fest, right? I mean, you're just going to have to shoot something really, really low. So let's see what this model pumps out for us. And I kind of I guess I could have guessed this. There's no surprise that Bryson's my number one golfer. I think the surprise is he is significantly the best golfer in this model. So the way this is set up, the lower the score, the better. So Bryson is a 7.7 in my model. Tony Finau, the next best golfer, is 33.1. So then there's not that big of a gap between Finau and Harris English, who's 36, right? So, I mean, Bryson's literally lapping the field in my model. And I hate paying for the most expensive golfer. This might be the week that I do it. So my top 5 are Bryson, Tony, Harris English, Patrick Cantlay, believe it or not, that goes against my gut. Webb Simpson, that rounds out the top 5. Then I get Sam Burns and Christopher Ventura. They're both sub 7,500. Scotty Scheffler, Lonto Griffin on there. This is kind of how the Lonto Griffin stuff started, is like every time I ran a model, he'd be in the top 10 of it or whatever. And I'm like, maybe Lonto's good. And he's always $6,500. Now he's $7,300 this week, but I still think he makes for a fine play. I'll tell you what, there's a couple guys that go against my gut in this model, which I think is a good thing. There's a reason. That's why I do it. But this player pool of the top 10, 12, 15 golfers, that's like the guys I would want to play. So I'm completely comfortable with this. It makes a lot of sense. All right, there we go. Shriners this week. Betting preview will be out on Tuesday. Wednesday, we'll do the live stream. There'll be fades and sleepers in between all of that. If you fill out the survey, it'll take you 2 seconds, and it'll help both me and you, hopefully, in the future. I'm stoked about it. Best of luck this week, and I'll talk to you guys soon.